Church, you know, as I've said many times, there are moments in life that just stick with you. Experiences that humble you and remind you that you're not always as in control as you think you are. I remember a few years back I'd made plans to go to the Sunshine Coast to see friends. I'd meticulously planned the route, checked the car, packed all the essentials, and I, of course, thought I had everything figured out and ready. I hit the road full of excitement, but about halfway to my destination, deep in what felt like the middle of nowhere, the car started making really strange noises and randomly losing power. Now, my immediate thought was, no big deal, I can handle this. I'm the son of a mechanic. I pulled over, popped the hood, and stared blankly at the engine. Now, I can change a tyre, change the oil, a few other amateur bits and pieces, but this was way beyond my skill set. All my careful planning, all my perceived control vanished at that moment. There I was on the side of the road, hours from anything, completely reliant on someone else to help me. It was a humbling experience, realizing how quickly my meticulously constructed plans can fall apart and how utterly dependent we are, on help from outside ourselves when things go wrong. See, sometimes life goes pear-shaped, doesn't it? These moments when our own strength, our own wisdom simply isn't enough. And it's in those moments that we're often forced to look beyond ourselves, to surrender and to trust that there's a bigger plan at play. See, true strength isn't found in defiance, but in humble surrender to God and compassionate service to others. Now, my little car trouble story might seem simple, but the feeling of being utterly out of control, of realizing your own limitations, that's something, if we're honest with ourselves, that we all experience, something we all go through. Now, maybe your roadside breakdown moment wasn't a car at all, but a health crisis that rocked your world. A job loss that pulled the rug out from under your financial security. Perhaps it was a relationship that fractured unexpectedly, leaving you heartbroken and bewildered. Maybe it's watching your grown children making decisions that you don't agree with and scare you. Whatever it is, we've all had those moments where our carefully constructed lives feel like they're crumbling, where our strength isn't enough and where our plans fall apart. Deep down, every one of us grapples with this. We grapple with a fundamental struggle, the desire for control versus the reality of our human limitations. We long to be self-sufficient, to manage our own lives, to be masters of our own destinies. It's a natural human impulse, born out of a desire for security and significance. But often this impulse can morph into something less healthy. A quiet defiance against anything that challenges our autonomy, even against God himself. We convince ourselves that we know best, that our ways are superior, and that relying on anyone else, even our Creator, is a sign of weakness. Even worse, we can trick ourselves into believing that our way is God's way. Now, this isn't just about big, dramatic failures, it's about the everyday struggles too, the quiet pride that keeps us from admitting we're wrong, the subtle ways we try to manipulate situations to our advantage, the constant striving for self-affirmation in a world that often leaves us feeling inadequate. These are all echoes of that same human tendency to resist surrender, to believe that our own will is paramount. We all face this pull, this internal battle between wanting to be our own gods and recognizing our desperate need for a God who is truly in control. And what's the result of this common struggle? A deep, deep, universal need for something beyond ourselves, for grace, for forgiveness, and for a complete transformation of our hearts. We need grace to cover our defiance, forgiveness for our self-centeredness, and a spiritual makeover that shifts our focus from ourselves to something much greater. See, true strength isn't found in defiance, but in humble surrender to a God and compassionate service to others. And it is only then that we find peace and purpose in our hearts, a peace that we truly crave. But how do we achieve this? How do we move from our natural bent towards defiance and self-reliance to a life characterized by humble surrender and compassionate service? The answer, as always, lies in understanding God's heart and his ways. And for that, we turn to a powerful ancient lesson. So let's look at Jeremiah 50. The story of Babylon, the story that's not just a historical account. It's a powerful lesson echoing across millennia, revealing timeless truths about God's character and his expectations for humanity. The prophet Jeremiah, who for 45 chapters dealt exclusively with the Jewish people, warning them of Babylonian captivity due to their rebellion and idolatry, it now shifts focus. In these concluding chapters of his book, Jeremiah turns to God's rebuke of the surrounding Gentile nations, particularly Babylon, who influenced Judah's idolatry. This might seem puzzling at first. Why would God punish Babylon if he used them as his instrument of discipline? The answer reveals deep truths about God's justice, his call for humility, and his heart for the oppressed. So let's look closely at chapter 50. The first lesson that we can learn from Babylon's downfall is about rejecting joy over others' misfortune and embracing compassion. Rejecting joy over others' misfortune and embracing compassion. Babylon, in its conquest of Judah, was not merely fulfilling God's disciplinary purpose. It was reveling in the suffering it caused, taking joy from it. And God addresses this directly in Jeremiah 50, 11-13. It says, "Though you rejoice, though you exult, O plunderers of my heritage, though you frolic like a heifer in the pasture, and neigh like stallions, your mother shall be utterly shamed, and she who bore you shall be disgraced. Behold, she shall be the last of the nations, a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. Because of the wrath of the Lord she shall not be inhabited, but shall be an utter desolation. Everyone who passes by Babylon shall be appalled and hiss because of all her wounds." Babylon was like wild animals, gleefully celebrating the destruction of God's people. This kind of joy, this rejoicing in someone else's pain, is a deep offense to God. It speaks to a heart lacking empathy, a spirit that elevates itself above others, finding satisfaction in their downfall. While it's natural to feel a sense of justice when someone who has wronged us faces consequences, God calls us to a higher standard. He doesn't want us cheering from the sidelines. Now, consider that moment when you're stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. Perhaps you're running late already, feeling the frustration growing. Then you see someone zipping by on the shoulder, breaking the rules, seemingly getting ahead. You might feel a surge of annoyance, even anger. But then a mile down the road, you see them pulled over by a police officer. What's your immediate reaction? Now, if we're honest, many of us might feel a tiny little bit of satisfaction, thinking they got what they deserved. It's a common human impulse, but it's precisely what God warns against. Proverbs 17:5 reminds us, whoever gloats over disaster will not go unpunished. And Proverbs 24:17-18 states, do not gloat when your enemy falls, when he stumbles, do not let your heart rejoice, or the Lord will see and disapprove. Instead, Jesus commands us in Luke 6:28, bless those who curse you and pray for those who mistreat you. This is radically countercultural. It pushes against our natural desire for vengeance or self-vindication. But it's a reflection of God's heart, who himself died on the cross so that we wouldn't get what we deserve. It's cross nature, not human nature. See, true strength isn't found in defiance, but in humble surrender to God and compassionate service to others. Okay, our second point, danger of defiance. Babylon was condemned for its defiance against God, urging us to embrace surrender. Jeremiah 50:29 declares, summon archers against Babylon, all those who bend the bow. Encamp around her, let no one escape. Repay her according to her deeds. Do to her according to all that she has done. For she has proudly defied the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. To defy means to go against, to resist, to challenge authority. Babylon openly opposed the Lord. While defying an earthly ruler for the sake of God, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did when they refused to worship Nebuchadnezzar, it can be a sign of faithfulness. But defying God himself is always destructive. You can only defy the Lord for so long until you deal with the consequences. But God in his love allows us to experience these painful consequences, the consequences of our resistance, hoping it will lead us back to him. Now think about Paul, his encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus. Before his conversion, Paul, then known as Saul, was zealously persecuting Christians, believing them to be a heretical sect. And Jesus confronts him with this question in Acts 26:14. He says, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And then added, it's hard for you to kick against the goad. Now a goad was a sharp stick used by farmers to prod oxen. When an ox kicked against the goad, it only caused itself more pain and injury. So Jesus was essentially saying to Paul, saying to us, I've been trying to get your attention and your resistance is only making things harder and more painful for you. How often do you do the same thing? Is Jesus trying to get your attention and you're kicking against it, only causing yourself more pain? See, we cling to our own will, our own desires, even when God is clearly calling us to a different path. We kick against his leading, ignoring the quiet promptings of his Spirit, or even the loud, painful lessons life throws our way. How many broken relationships, how many sleepless nights, how many cycles of frustration will it take before we realize that our defiance only makes our lives more miserable? Proverbs 13:15 states, the way of the transgressor is hard. God doesn't want to see us suffer. He wants us to find peace and freedom in surrender. He doesn't want us to defy, to be a transgressor. So stop kicking, surrender, and remember, true strength isn't found in defiance, but in humble surrender to God and compassionate service to others. Okay, and our final point, pride, the mother of all sins. Babylon exemplifies the destructive nature of arrogance. It calls us to embrace humility. Jeremiah 50:31-32 proclaims, "Behold, I am against you, O proud one, declares the Lord God of hosts. For your day has come, the time when I will punish you. The proud one shall stumble and fall, with none to raise him up, and I will kindle a fire in his cities, and it will devour all that is around him." Now, unlike joy, arrogance or pride is never good. It's an affront to God. It's rooted in the very first sin, Lucifer's desire to be equal with God. Pride is often called the pregnant mother of all sins because many other sins can be traced back to a root of entitlement or self-exaltation, to pride, to arrogance. Now, God actively opposes the proud, but he extends grace to the humble. We see this played out beautifully when Jesus' disciples, even after all their time with him, argued about who among them was the greatest. In Matthew 18:1-4, Jesus called a little child and had him stand among them, saying, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." He didn't point to the most learned. Jesus didn't point to the most charismatic. He didn't point to the oldest, the wisest, the most reverent, the most gifted, or the most powerful. He pointed to a child. To a child. See, children in their natural state are dependent, trusting and unburdened by self-importance. Humility comes natural to them. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself, by the way. It's thinking of yourself less.